Hey there, welcome back to our channel. In today's video, we'll be exploring 20 shocking psychological facts that can help you understand yourself and the people around you better. By the end of this video, you'll be armed with a deeper understanding of the human mind, and this knowledge will help you make better decisions in your life. So, without further ado, let's get started. Fact 1. The Baader-Meinhof phenomenon. Have you ever noticed that once you learn a new word or phrase, you suddenly start seeing it everywhere? This is called the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon, and it's a psychological phenomenon that happens when you learn something new, and your brain starts to look for it everywhere. Fact 2. The Dunning-Kruger effect. The Dunning-Kruger effect is a cognitive bias that makes people overestimate their abilities. This means that people who are not very good at something tend to think they are better than they actually are. Fact 3. The primacy and recency effect. When people remember a list of items, they tend to remember the first and last items better than the middle items. This is called the primacy and recency effect. Fact 4. The bystander effect. The bystander effect is a phenomenon that occurs when people don't help someone in need because they assume that someone else will. This happens because people tend to think that someone else will take responsibility, so they don't take action themselves. Fact 5. The halo effect. The halo effect is a cognitive bias that makes people think that if someone is good at one thing, they must be good at everything else too. This can lead to people making assumptions about someone based on one positive trait. Fact 6. The false consensus effect. The false consensus effect is a cognitive bias that makes people overestimate the number of people who agree with them. This happens because people tend to surround themselves with like-minded people, so they assume that everyone else thinks the same way. Fact 7. The Pygmalion effect. The Pygmalion effect is a phenomenon that occurs when people's expectations of someone else affect that person's performance. If someone believes that someone else is capable of doing something, they are more likely to do it. Fact 8. The confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is a cognitive bias that makes people seek out information that confirms their existing beliefs. This means that people tend to ignore information that contradicts their beliefs. Fact 9. The framing effect. The framing effect is a cognitive bias that makes people react differently to the same information, depending on how it is presented. For example, people might be more likely to choose a product if it is presented as having a discount, even if the actual price is the same. Fact 10. The illusory superiority bias. The illusory superiority bias is a cognitive bias that makes people overestimate their abilities in relation to others. This happens because people tend to compare themselves to others who are worse than them, rather than those who are better. Fact 11. The spotlight effect. The spotlight effect is a cognitive bias that makes people overestimate how much other people notice their flaws or mistakes. This happens because people tend to focus on their own flaws and assume that other people are doing the same. Fact 12. The Zeigarnik effect. The Zeigarnik effect is a psychological phenomenon that makes people remember unfinished tasks better than completed ones. This is why people often remember to do something they started but forgot to finish. Fact 13. The anchoring bias. The anchoring bias is a cognitive bias that makes people rely too heavily on the first piece of information they receive when making decisions. This means that people tend to be influenced by the first number, price, or estimate they hear, even if it is not accurate. Fact 14. The self-serving bias. The self-serving bias is a cognitive bias that makes people attribute their successes to internal factors, such as their abilities, while attributing their failures to external factors, such as bad luck or other people's actions. Fact 15. The reciprocity principle. The reciprocity principle is a social norm that says people tend to return favors, gifts, or kind gestures. This is why companies often give away free samples or gifts to potential customers. Fact 16. The fundamental attribution error. The fundamental attribution error is a cognitive bias that makes people overemphasize personality traits and underestimate situational factors when explaining other people's behavior. Fact 17. The endowment effect. The endowment effect is a cognitive bias that makes people value something more once they own it. This is why people often have a hard time letting go of possessions, even if they no longer need or use them. Fact 18. The paradox of choice. The paradox of choice is a psychological phenomenon that makes people less satisfied with their decisions when they have too many options to choose from. This is because too many options can make people feel overwhelmed and anxious. Fact 19. The social comparison theory. The social comparison theory is a psychological theory that says people evaluate themselves by comparing themselves to others. This is why people often feel better or worse about themselves depending on who they are comparing themselves to. Fact 20. The Pyrrhic victory effect. The Pyrrhic victory effect is a psychological phenomenon that makes people feel worse after achieving a goal than they did before. This is because people often set unrealistic expectations for themselves, and once they achieve their goal, they realize it did not make them as happy as they thought it would. So there you have it. 20 shocking psychological facts that can help you better understand yourself and the people around you. By learning about these psychological phenomena, you can make better decisions, avoid common cognitive biases, and improve your relationships with others. We hope you found this video informative and valuable. Don't forget to like and share this video with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. Thanks for watching.